Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome to Breakfast in the Class. Breakfast in the Class today is sponsored by Stephen Rappaport, the king of breakfast, in honor of Charles Darwish, who is a good friend of the community, and as well, sponsored by Stephen Rappaport in honor of the Kahal on the first day, this was yesterday, but today on the second day of Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan, for success in everything. Hazak Baruch. Breakfast is dedicated also in celebration of the birth of their grandson Robert Marcus to Gabriella and Nathan Marcus, sponsored by Renata and Robert Marcus. Siman Tov u'Mabruk. Another Robert Marcus in the world can only be an amazing thing. The first go around, the one that I met, did an amazing job at being an awesome human being. So we have high hopes for his namesake. Breakfast in the Class is also sponsored by Emmanuel Zara, dedicated in honor of Bobby Shamsian and his family. Thank you for your kindness and hand in friendship. Fantastic. Okay. As well, and last but not least, Breakfast in the Class is sponsored by the king of Rosh Chodesh, and that is Yaakov Shirazi, where he goes up to the Torah and he dedicates the next Rosh Chodesh. And very quickly, he gets into next year's Rosh Chodesh, and the year after Rosh Chodesh. So Rosh Chodesh has been dedicated until the year 2525, by Yaakov Shirazi. So he's always making sure that on Rosh Chodesh we're having a beautiful Seudah in the morning. And he wrote here on the occasion of Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan, La'aslacha b'kol mikol kol, for success in everything. That's what he wrote when he dedicated this, I don't know, about a year ago. But I asked him today, please, if I could change his dedication today, and in addition, I'm going to dedicate today's class, which was sponsored by Yaakov Shirazi, in honor of his recent marriage to Avital. He got married this past week, Yaakov and Avital Shirazi, b'siman tov u'b'mazal tov. What excellent and beautiful news to be able to bring to the community. Hashem should be mizakeh them to build Beit Ne'eman b'Yisrael, to achieve great things. V'asu hayil b'Yisrael, inshallah, be'ezrat Hashem. It's so beautiful to share such good news. Okay, Rabotai, there's an idea that I've been thinking a lot about, and I've shared it a couple times in the past week, and I found that it has been a very powerful concept. When we read about Noach, most often people think about the disaster of Noach, but really, the story is about much more than the disaster. It's also about what Noach achieves, what Noach manages to create. Noach manages to create a place within which those that he loves the most, his family, are safe, even though everything outside is shot to pieces, even though everything outside is destroyed, even though everything outside is evil, even though everything outside is a flood. Inside the teva that Noach manages to create, the teva is life. The teva is survival. And Noach, in building this teva and following the instructions that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given him, literally paves the way to become the father of all of humanity. There's not a person alive who did not come from Noach. Think about that. In fact, we use those words in the prayer on Rosh Hashanah when we talk about how we are Noach's grandchildren, and how we now need to come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and ask like he did to be saved. So I want to point out something interesting, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives Noach a blueprint of the Teva. And at first glance, you think, okay, Hashem is teaching Noach how to build a Teva. He's teaching him how to build a boat. And it's quite a funny thing, because, do we need the measurements of that boat for posterity? Do we need to know that Noach installed, two means of egress? Is it important to us to realize that Noach installed a light switch next to the bathroom? Why do we need the blueprints of the Teva? Why is it relevant to tell us, that he made a first floor and a second floor and a third floor? Who cares how he did it? Why is that important? And build a tzohar, let there be a light, the Ramban takes one route in answering this question. Ramban writes that the structure of the Teva was something that was impossible to be able to float. If you actually built the Teva and stuck it in the water and filled it with what Noach had it filled with, that thing would sink faster than the stones you try and skip when people are watching. You ever notice that? You go to the beach, you skip it, goes halfway to Gibraltar. Then you're like, oh my God, that was amazing. Watch. And then you do it, it goes bloop once. That's how fast your teva would sink. Sorry, I amused myself. Right? So why, what is the Ramban trying to say? So what? The point was to illustrate that what Noach did was doomed to fail. And in fact, what kept Noach alive was not his teva, but that he'd followed the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Interesting, I always felt that was so interesting. The word teva in Hebrew, what does it mean? It means an ark. But the word teva in Hebrew also means a word. Tevot, right? What saved Noach? Following the word. Beautiful. He hid in the word, in the commandment of Borei Olam. But it goes deeper than that as well. It was almost as if God was trying to illustrate that this is nothing but me. Vayizgor, as the pasuk says, Noach goes in teva, Vayizgor Hashem ba'ado, and God is the one that closes him in. God is the one that seals, that hermetically protects this teva from leaks and from being affected by the sulfur-infused water, by the boiling temperatures of the water, etc., etc., etc. Now, having said all of this, we understand that what Noach was doing was a miracle. But I think that line of thought is one idea or one way of looking at why the Torah chose to, number one, mention the blueprints of the teva, but also why God would have Noach build a teva that was doomed to fail, besides for a mitzvah, besides for a miracle. Illustrating that, you know what, the survival of man is only shayach, is only possible when God wills it to be so. God is the only element that a person can escape to, and without that, there's nothing. That's one line of thought in understanding this. But perhaps today I'd like to suggest another way of looking at the teva. You know, this concept, the teva, what was it? It was something that saved his family from what was going on outside. Perhaps the nature of the teva is teaching you the lessons that you need to learn in order to be able to insulate, in order to be able to save your family from what's going on around you outside, from the craziness of the world outside, just beyond your front door. You know, many people say that part of the reason why we have this minhag to kiss the Mizuza on the way in and on the way out, it's not in the Torah that you have to kiss the Mizuza. The Torah says, right, that you have to place these words, it doesn't say, and you'll put it on the mizuzot betecha ubisharecha, v'nashakta oto betzetcha, it doesn't say that. Boacha ubetzetecha, it doesn't say that. We have a minhag to kiss the mizuzah every time we walk in and every time we walk out. And one of the reasons for that's brought down in Sfarim, is that a person should be cognizant of the fact that his house, that a Jewish home, is the most beautiful blessing. And the way you'll remember and the way you'll respect the blessing that your Jewish home is, as a buttress, as a fortress, to not allow the values of the outside world to penetrate and to permeate your home, to teach your children what it means to be a good Jewish person, to teach your kids the values that our parents have died, grandparents have died to be able to instill in us, all throughout the ages. Only yesterday, there was a terrible occurrence, and I don't know if anyone saw this. They caught people they didn't catch the people yet, but people graffitied the barracks in Auschwitz. And what did they graffiti the barracks in Auschwitz with? Anti-Semitic slogans, denial of the Holocaust. They're spraying it on the barracks in Auschwitz. Holocaust denial. You think about that for 1 second. Let that sink in. It's a crazy thing that's what's going on in the world around us. The world has insane ideas about how it should be run. Those things are taking place around us. Again, I point this out, not as a Trump fan. I point this out, not as a Republican, but as an American, as a human. To think that Twitter does not allow Donald Trump to have an account but allows the Taliban to have an account. Again, let that sink in for a second. It's insanity. It's pure, raw, lost the marbles, lost the plot. You know that Bernie Sanders should stand up yesterday and say that two people should not be able to inflict their will on the 48 other people. Do you know how politics work? Do you understand the concept of that vote? That is exactly how it was designed to operate. But again, the idea that I only believe in what I believe in. And by the way, you flip this the other way, it's also 100% true. There are things that we say that are also kind of ridiculous. If you're a Republican, also ridiculous. But we've become so bent, so fixed in our ways that we are not allowing ourselves to see anything outside of that which we wish to see. That's not supposed to be in a Jewish home. So when you kiss the Mizuza on the way out, you remind yourself what's inside and what's outside. What am I bringing from the outside to the inside? Rashi tells us that the 3 floors on the Beit HaMikdash, of the Teva, what were the 3 floors for? Elyonim la'adam. The top one was for the people. Emtsaim, the middle one, Shniim, was lemador, for the animals to be able to live. And Tachtiim, the bottom one, what was it for? Lezevel, for the garbage. Again, does Hashem need to record in the Torah? Oh, guys, and let me just tell you, you know where Noach put the garbage? On the bottom floor. What? There's no other place the Torah mentions a trash bin. It was one of those cool kinds that you step on it and it comes down slowly. Like, I always wondered, do we really need that in a garbage can? Is it important to have, luxury in a place of garbage? And yet the Torah records an entire floor for the garbage. Why? Because the message is here to teach us about what it takes to preserve, to create a healthy family, to build literally, again, and I don't mean this in a flaky way, to build a safe space, to build, let's call it something else so we don't get triggered, to build a space which is safe. How do you do that? And one of the most important things in building a healthy family is in building and creating boundaries and compartments in your life. You know, when a person falls in love, or when they have children, or when they decide to get married, or when they start a new business, or when they start learning a new Masechet Gemara, or when they open up a passion project and they start volunteering, everyone wants to think it's going to be chocolate and roses. No one thinks that there's going to be any garbage. And there's not going to be anyone who's going to be involved in my charitable organization that's going to be in it for the ego. Not going to happen. And me and my wife, we look at each other, oh my gosh, there's such love, there's such connection. We're never going to fight over. We're not going to be like those other couples. Yeah, you are. Not right now. But the time will come. We're human. Yes, someone's going to stand up for ego and say that they're standing up for principle. That's going to happen. You know what? Your children are going to rebel, and they're going to tell you that they don't want to do what you want them to do. That's going to happen. And the business deal is not going to go right. And you know what? You're going to get upset at work. And what are you going to do? You're going to come home and be upset in your house. There's going to be garbage. Make sure that it stays on the bottom floor. Don't bring that upstairs into your bedroom. Apologize to your wife before you go upstairs, before you go to bed. These are simple messages that the Torah is teaching you. The idea that Elyonim, that the top floor, that the number one priority needs to be la'adam, needs to be for the people in your life. That sounds like it's an obvious thing. For most people in their life, it is not an obvious thing. You know what your wife and kids get? Whatever was left over after you came home from work. That's what they get. That's the dad and that's the father that they get at the end of the day. Whatever you had left to give them after you spent it all at work. That's not Elyonim la'adam. That's taking your job, Noach's job was the middle floor, and putting it on the top floor. So this idea, the compartmentalization, the idea that if I had a terrible day at work, the Zevil stays on the bottom floor. Don't bring that upstairs. How does a person do that? One of the tricks to doing that can be found in kissing the Mizuza. You get home, don't kiss the Mizuza on your way in. Kiss the Mizuza of your front door while it's still closed. And think to yourself as you're walking in, I've arrived at a holy place, at a place which is special, a place where my family lives. What am I bringing inside from my day? Am I bringing home some garbage? Am I bringing home the animals that I interacted with at work? Both in terms of the fact that they got you upset, right? Or in terms of the language that gets used in some boardrooms. You're going to bring that home? You're going to bring home the garbage? You're going to bring home the animalistic behavior, the animalistic language? Are you going to do that? You know, many of us, in order to do the jobs that we do at work, you know, we need to play roles. We need to become master negotiators. You're going to bring that, your master negotiation skills, your ability to box someone into a corner logically, mentally, listening carefully to everything they say, using it judiciously against them. You're going to bring that home and use that on your wife to get what you want in the relationship. You're going to use that on your children instead of listening, changing the methodology, the process to the process which is appropriate for humans. Noach's job with the animals was to put food there. Was his job to be empathic? Was his job to understand their greatest needs, their desires, their strengths, their weaknesses? It wasn't. But could you imagine that's how Noach dealt with his family? Just throwing the plate down in front of them? That's not appropriate. That had to be on another level, figuratively, and as well, literally. But so many fathers and mothers, they treat their children like their clients and stakeholders. They treat their wives and husbands like they would someone in the world of business. Get something, give something. Get something, give something. Never give something unless you're going to get something. That's another flaw. That doesn't work here. My friends, the Teva had some unbelievable concepts. I mentioned earlier that the Torah tells us, "Ve'el ama tichlena milmala." Let the roof of the ark, let it be pitched. El ama tichlena milmala. And I always loved this idea. Remember, the top floor was for human beings. HaKadosh Baruch Hu asked Noach to create on the top floor a illusion of smallness, of intimacy, of closeness. Not a giant square at the top, which would create a space of distance. And by the way, I was fascinated. I read that there was a study that says that people who have a chandelier hanging over their dining room table are much more likely to have warm conversations at the dinner table. Did you ever read this before? And it doesn't have to be a chandelier. It's not like, this is not a study, proving Hungarian grandmas are right. That's not the point. It's that the light fixture is not a spotlight from the top. It's something that hangs low. It's that it creates this illusion that light is here. What a special idea, okay? That top floor, it should be a little bit more narrow. It should feel a little bit more close. Think about this. Remember, the Teva downstairs had thousands of animals. How wide, how big did that need to be able to incorporate everything? How many people are upstairs? 8 people. It's pretty big. Now, I'm sure he built rooms and bedrooms, but you know what? But the point is that if you're going to spend that amount of time with somebody who's really important to you, there should be a feeling of intimacy. And I love this idea. Ve'el ama tichlenna milmala. And at the top, it should kind of end at an arm's length. Ama is an arm's length. It's illustrating this idea that a person who has someone that they love in their family, they should never be. It's illustrating this element of distance between a person. El ama. Ama is an arm's length. They should be involved, enveloped in your hug, in your embrace, in your connection with them. And I think that on some level, that is something which is missing so much today. Parents are always asking how to protect their kids in a crazy world. And they want to know what they should teach them or what they should say to them. And so often I'm just thinking to myself, how is it not obvious that it's not about what you're going to say to them? Because any idea that you put forth, there's 1,000 more floating outside, 2 clicks away on their phone. Right? It's not just the force of the ideas that you impart. It's the warmth that they sense from you. It's the connection that they feel with you that will make those ideas triumph over the ones that other people say. I'm fond of this quote. I mention it all the time. They say people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Quote from Maya Angelou. All right? And I always love that idea, because how true is that concept? You come high-flying professor from who knows where, you don't care about me, you're telling me that, all right, that's what you say. What is that? What do I care? But when someone feels someone is saying something, and this person cares about me, and this person loves me, and this person knows me, there's an element of closeness, of intimacy. They're trying to be close with me. Then the idea that they share is not an idea in the world, it's the idea of someone who's very, very close with me. I think that that's perhaps one of the most beautiful concepts that the Teva teaches us. There are many others that we don't have time to visit in this short session. But at the very least, this concept of compartmentalization. Just because something's going wrong in one area of your life does not mean that it needs to feel that the other parts of your life are failing. And oftentimes, a person, because they're having trouble in business, their marriage suffers as well. And I often want to tell people who tell me that, it should be the opposite. The fact that you're struggling in one area should reinforce the other areas. Now is a time for that person to be more present for you to be able to share with them that vulnerability. It's so obvious, but it doesn't get done. The compartmentalization, Rabotai, of a person's learning of Torah. You know you need to learn, but then you tell yourself, I'm busy, I have lots of things going on. I'm sorry, but this part doesn't get to infringe on this part. Is this clear? Yes, also, wife should know, and children should know, that dad also has spaces in his life that are sacred for other reasons. He needs to work. Mom needs to work. They also need time for themselves. You know, I was raised in my house that you never walk into your parents' room without knocking on the door. And that's not just because it might be inappropriate to walk in. It's because not knocking is inappropriate. This is their space. This is like the Elyonim, Emtsaim Tachtiyim. There are spaces. There are spaces. And by the way, the same thing is with children. A father should knock on the door of his child before he walks in. Again, not so the kid's doing anything wrong inside, they should be able to hide. It's kavod. That's the child's space. You know, if you're worried that something is happening, that's something else. You know, you need to be able to walk in without announcing yourself. But in general, this idea of the compartmentalization of our lives is so important. And it allows us to contain the areas. And I just want to share one last bit. You know, if you go today into a ship, if you ever go, I went to the Intrepid a while ago with my family. Every ship has this. There's a way to lock off sections of the ship. So if, God forbid, there's a leak on the lower right-hand side, the whole ship doesn't come down. What do? They get everyone out of that spot. They shut the door. They seal the door. It's hermetically sealed. And the water flows in over there. But it has no way of penetrating to the rest of the ship. My friends, if you have strong boundaries in these different areas of your life, then when, God forbid, something happens, you're capable of retreating out of that area, shutting it off, regrouping, and then figuring out how to deal with that. But if you do not have those things, if you bring your anger home or your impatience home, if you bring, the fact that you didn't get what you wanted in the workplace, and vice versa, if you had a fight at home and brought that and started yelling at your coworkers, right? If you didn't figure out how to do this, ultimately something taking place in one part can tank the entire operation. Hashem should bless us to lead incredibly successful lives, to build beautiful, spaces that are safe. Hashem should bless us to be able to distinguish between the human beings in our life and those that are acting like animals. Hashem should bless us with the ability to recognize what is zevel, what is garbage, what is just something that you don't need to worry yourself about. A person said this to me, they did this to me, you know what? What should I say? You know what you should say? Nothing. Did you ever bark back at a dog? Right? You don't have to do that. But the recognition of what is a human, what is an animal, what is a piece of garbage is so important. And may Hashem bless us to raise safe, healthy, happy children. May Hashem bless us to have a feeling in our homes that we here are okay, even if everything outside is a little bit crazy in the world around us. And Vayizgor Hashem ba'ado, when we do our efforts, HaKadosh Baruch Hu also merits and helps us to achieve those aims as well. Baruch Hanai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.